All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'll be respectful of your time and start on time. My name is Michael Cruz. I am the founder and principal of Foresight Insurance. I am also the CEO of Virtual Intelligence, the company hosting this webinar today. And my goal today is to share with you the countless hours that I've invested in learning Microsoft, and hopefully I can save you time. Uh, my goal today is to really kind of tie those dots together for you when it comes to Microsoft. This is recorded, so don't worry if you miss something. Make sure you write down the questions that you may have so you can go back and reference them later. I'll make sure to kind of emphasize on important things that maybe I don't have the time in sharing right now, but that I'm going to ask you to maybe do a little bit more homework on so that you can better understand that thing.
This call will be recorded.
So my goal today is really to help you guys unlock the whole Microsoft ecosystem that we have. Because and just want to confirm, I assume, but I assume that everyone here is on Microsoft. Is that correct? Is there anyone not on Microsoft here? Just want to make sure you're in the right class. So, we used to be in Gmail. We switched to Microsoft about close to 2 years ago. And that's where kind of my whole journey started with learning more about Microsoft. And, like most of you, I was, utilizing it at a very, very low scale. So my goal is to kind of help you guys unlock it to a higher level in your agency. And not only how to unlock it, but how to organize your agency. I feel like that's something that we all struggle with. And we're going to talk about a little bit about Foresight, my agency, how I'm organizing it in my agency. So let me go ahead and mute everybody that's joining here.
Hey, Michael, I'm not sure if it's just my screen or not, but it looks like your screen is like in portrait format. Maybe it's just me.
No, thank you for that. I have it on my vertical monitor.
Tall screen.
Yeah, let me move it to my other screen. So thank you for that.
Yep.
That's why you're here, buddy. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, let me know if he looks better now.
Perfecto.
All right, perfect. So one of the things that I realized when I started diving deep into Microsoft is that, man, Microsoft is such a huge ecosystem. They have so many apps. Yet, if you really talk to most people are just really utilizing very little of it. Maybe they're using chat and stuff like that, and everything is kind of disconnected. Nothing really connects to each other. There's really no understanding of how all these things tie together. And everything is like every time you save a file, you don't know where to save it, give it access to everybody. So that's the main problem that I see. Essentially, for example, let's say you have a file that you created, like a list of a monoline home list. You save it in your desktop instead of a place where everybody has access to. When you have conversations, you maybe have it on a one-on-one basis, instead of having it in a place where everyone has access to certain conversations that multiple people have to have access to that conversation. Also, the way you're saving your files don't really match how everything else works in your agency, like the tasks you have in your management system versus the files that you have in your internal system. So, there's no really organization with the way training files sometimes are stored. Nobody can really find everything. And a lot of us really become kind of that glue that ties everything together. If you relate to that, if you can type in the chat, yes, if you know what I'm talking about, where you have to always send all these documents, and Mitch, he knew this when we joined forces, everybody would reach out to Mitch. Hey, Mitch, can you send me the presentation for this or the file for that? So Mitch was the glue for virtual intelligence for us for a long time when he came to this. Perfect. Thank you so much. And that was the biggest realization that I had is basically, man, we're for a very fraction, because Microsoft is not that expensive, so we're already paying for this membership. We have access to all these apps. And the wild thing is like so many of us are not utilizing these apps. We're probably utilizing 30% of the capacity. And it happens with everything we do, right? It happens with our CRM, with our management system. It's just too big, right? So, and a lot of times, the biggest problem that I found with Microsoft is that people don't understand how things connect. And that was kind of the big piece for me that I want to show you today is how everything connects. And if you build it the right way, one thing that happens in one system, you can see it in another system, you know. So that was the biggest takeaway for me that I want to show you today. So this is kind of the agenda today. We're going to first kind of go over how the foundation works so you understand from the beginning so you build it right. We're going to talk about some of the collaboration tools that Microsoft has so you don't have to go and pay extra money to get other tools. We're going to talk about Foresights setup, you know, how I'm organized, how I'm doing it. I'm not saying it's the right way. I'm just going to share what we're doing. And we're going to talk about some of the, if we have time, some of the beyond the basics things that you can look into or hire somebody to do. So here's kind of where everything really starts, the Microsoft ecosystem architecture. So what I want you to write down in your notes right now is learn how to create a team. So if you know how to create a team in Microsoft, I know that when you create a Microsoft, you kind of get one, but how many of you could, if you could type yes or no in the chat, how many of you know how to create a brand new team in your Microsoft system? So I want you to put that in the notes. Learn how to create a team in Microsoft, right? So that's the first note that I want you to take because I'm not going to have the time to teach you that today, but that's something you can kind of learn on YouTube or search on ChatGPT. Here's kind of the missing piece that we didn't know until later on. When you create a team in Microsoft, it's going to automatically create a chain of things that really glues everything together and allows it to connect to each other. And that's the problem. Since you don't know that that's how it works, you start creating things, you don't realize that there's an order of things that you have to create it so that you can really unlock the connection. So when you create a team, it creates automatically a SharePoint. How many of you here say yes or no have a SharePoint that you're using right now in your agency? Okay, we have a good mix of yes and no's. Is SharePoint essentially it's an intranet, you know? Let me show you real quick how mine looks like. Can you guys see my SharePoint? That's a SharePoint. You know, SharePoint is a place where I can store my documents and things like that. That is a SharePoint. So a lot of us, when we create a team, you automatically get a SharePoint that is created for you. So what is a SharePoint is essentially, and I will go deeper into it, but it creates a website where you can store documents and it kind of connects things together. When you create a team, you also you create a 365 group. So what does that mean? Think of a group like a group of people. So you can decide what people get access to that team and that Microsoft SharePoint. So think of the group as the people that join the group. And then also you get all these different apps that are connected to that group of people. So all those people that are in that group have access to those apps. Okay. So feel free to take a screenshot of this, or you'll get a copy of this in the recording. But this is the important infrastructure that you need to understand, because if you don't create the team first from Teams, all these things don't really glue together like they're supposed to. Right? So why does that matter? Because when you create a team, now when you save files inside that SharePoint, now everyone has access to those files in that team. Each channel that you create essentially gets their own folder. And Teams now becomes your front door to access your backdoor information. So now the reality is you're using a SharePoint right now, even if you never open it. You have a SharePoint right now that you can use at any time, a database. That is a great question. That is a Mitch question. I'm not sure if you can link an existing team to a SharePoint. And that's why it's important to kind of follow that order. So, you know, you need to maybe start from scratch.
There is a way on the back end of the administrative settings of SharePoint that you can restructure where that folder or where that team is assigned to. It's a little bit of a pain, but it can be done.
Perfect. There you go. So, because when you create a team, guys, Now you're creating all these different apps that essentially have access to that team. Okay. So you create a group, and then automatically create a SharePoint, and all these things are going to be connected. Okay.
Michael's a question: is OneDrive different than SharePoint? Can you explain that one, or would you like me to?
That's a good one. So we're going to talk about that in a second, but essentially OneDrive is going to be your personal files versus SharePoint is going to be the share files. And that's kind of what the difference is from having the file stored in a SharePoint versus, your OneDrive. So here are the different apps that now these apps connect to that one team because by following that formula. Okay, so when you create a team, you get a 365 group, you get a SharePoint site, and now you get a planner inside of the same team. How many of you have heard of Microsoft Planner? So Microsoft Planner is very similar to a lot of tools like Asana, like ClickUp. So if you haven't heard of it, I want you to type Microsoft Planner in your notes so you can research. You can go find videos on YouTube. But that is like such a lot of us are managing projects in our agency that's not related to anything. So the Microsoft Planner allows you to manage those projects by having like a Kanban board where you can manage the different stages, almost like a pipeline, like an agency Zoom to manage those projects. You also get a share mail inbox, you get a share calendar, and you get a one notebook that personally we don't use. We now use Loop, and we'll talk about Loop in a second. So a lot of people make the mistake of creating a Microsoft Planner outside of this whole ecosystem. Okay. So when you create that team from the beginning, like I show you, and you create a planner within inside the team, which I'll show you how that looks like in a second. Now that planner is connected to that team. So now everyone that's part of that team has access to that planner. So that's one of the biggest things about that order. When you create a team, you have the option to create channels. So essentially channels are basically, there's three types of channels. There are standard channels, meaning that is visible to all the members in that team. There's private channels, so you can actually like keep it within the people that you want to keep. And there's share channels, basically for people that are outside of the organization. As you create different channels, and I think what I'm going to do right now is show you a little bit of how that looks at in my own system. I'll show you in a second what that looks like in my own system so that you can tie it all together. But when you create channels under that team, you can have different permission levels that I don't want to get too deep on, but you have the owner, the members, and the guests. And the files, in your team, they're actually going to live in the SharePoint. And anything that you do is basically accessible to everybody. So right now, for example, if you guys were to share a document from you save in your desktop and you share it on Teams, that's coming from your OneDrive. Versus like if you save it to your SharePoint, now everyone has access to that document versus just on a one-on-one basis. So that's kind of the advantage of having a SharePoint and saving the files in SharePoint. All right, I'll stop right here to see if anybody has any questions before we move on.
I don't see any specific ones. OneDrive different than SharePoint. I kind of answered that question. You did too. You're going to talk more about that. One thing I would suggest you guys understand, if you plan to use a SharePoint and share documents from that SharePoint with clients or people outside of your organization, aka people that don't have the same agency email address as you, and you want them to view a document that's inside your SharePoint, make sure you talk to your IT provider and make sure the security and permission settings on the back end are set correctly so that it gives you the permission to put anyone with this link. Because if not, SharePoint's going to default to keeping things as internal as possible, and it's very hard for you to, from the visual eye, to try to fix that. So get with your IT provider and have them update those permission levels for you, because it's like locked up like Fort Knox if you try to share something outside the shared team.
Yeah, and I think somebody asked about that here, Alex. If you need to have an Outlook email to be able to access SharePoint, and to Mitch's point, like basically that is your internal kind of knowledge base. Um, there is ways to give access to people outside of the organization. But like he said, you might just want to check with your IT so you're not unlocking it for anyone to have access to that information. All right. And trust me, like I'll show you my system in a second, so you'll put it all together at that point because I'm realizing that it's a little bit hard to visualize these things on just kind of on a concept. But so there's collaboration tools that basically Microsoft has that you can unlock um through setting up the organization like I talked about with where you create the team, where you create the channels within the team. Um, and one of the first ones is Loop. How many of you have heard of Loop in this meeting? Right? Yeah, which this is a perfect example why it's so important. Like Loop is one of the most powerful tools that Microsoft has created in the most recent year. I don't know how long they've been around, but Loop is one of the things that uh, we use in a very consistent basis. Um, Loop is basically the iteration of OneNote uh, on steroids, basically. And I see here like Mike and another person has questions. So if you guys can put in the chat so we can answer those questions, so we can keep this thing going. But um, I'm going to show you guys a little bit of how Loops looks like, for example. Let me see if I can find. So I'll show you guys here. So for example, I have a newsletter that I send out, and I manage my calendar for that newsletter inside of a loop. So here's kind of how the loop component looks. So what you have here is like a basically something that I created in a loop component, because the loop component is really just like a canvas. So if I go create new, this is how the brand new loop component looks. And if you hit the backlash, you can create all kinds of things. Like you can create a checklist, you can create um, you can even put code, you can put table, like which is what I had. You can create even a task. So if I put a task here, this task will show up in my to-do list. And you can do sub pages like Mitch just mentioned. So Loop is one of the most powerful components that Microsoft has for collaboration. So essentially, and you can also like have people, like for example, I'm gonna send this Loop component to my one of my employees here, Gustavo, to look at it, and you'll be able to see that Gustavo is looking at this document live with me. You see a little picture of him joining. But essentially, Loop is very really interactive that you can share a link. It's a little bit better than Word. It's going to have more things that you can do. And like I said, when you do the slash, you can enable so many features on it. I can go like this. You have different things that you can add into it. And you can organize it really nice. Like this is the title. You can put a subtitle here, um, a divider and things like that. So, and you can share this component anywhere else. All right, so that's Loop. You can collaborate, you can create, things. Is a lot better than for example, a Word document. So here's kind of the difference between Loop and OneNote. You get the real-time component aspect of it. It syncs everywhere and integrates with your team and your Outlook. And it's really built for collaboration versus, the OneNote is kind of, is a very just plain notepad, essentially. So how do we use Loop? For example, when we have a meeting, all of our meeting notes are in a Loop component. And we can attach those Loop components to an actual like calendar invite. When we have project plans, we can build timelines and updates across all locations. It's a way to do status report. It's a way for you to brainstorm, and it's a way to kind of also do a living, breathing knowledge base. The next tool that we talked about is basically Microsoft Planner, which is works like a visual board that essentially you can have stages on it. You know, and I can try to see if I can find one to kind of show you a little bit of how that looks. Give me
While
1 second.
you're looking that up, Michael, I got a quick little. So we figured this out with one of our other companies that in order, because it's kind of treated like an Asana as well. I guess if that's familiar with kind of what you guys would know. But the problem we faced is we would love to have like um, like have one main workspace and then sub workspace groups for different projects. That makes it very difficult with the basic version of Planner. So again, if you wanted, you can even get with your IT provider. We use Lightspeed. So I got with Lightspeed, told them, hey, I think it's called like Microsoft Professional. It's like one of their top things, like $50 a month, and it allows you to create and get more creative with Microsoft Planner if you do dive headfirst into that. Just a heads up. These are just things that I went through, frustrated, ticked off, couldn't figure out how it worked, and then again, reach out to the IT provider. They'll figure it out for you. They'll answer the question.
Exactly. So the planner is basically like a visual task board like Trello. You can organize it in buckets. You can assign tasks right outside of that planner. So like if you have a task that someone has to do, you can assign it to that person and it'll show up in their to-dos in Microsoft, which we'll cover. Every time that you create a Teams channel, it creates automatically a planner. So that's the cool thing about it. And now it's connected to that team. You know, you can add it as a tab to a channel, which I'll show you how that looks like in a second. And like I said, when you add tasks, it syncs with your Microsoft To-Do. So you're managing the project somewhere, but it shows up in your to-do list, you know, in other places. So for example, here's kind of how I'm creating a training for one of my newest employees. I have, for example, training in queue. Up next in training, I can put kind of a, you know, let's say a topic. I can add labels to it. You know, I can put start date, due date, repeat it. I can do a repeat. I can do a sub checklist. I can assign multiple people that are assigned to this, so it shows up in their to-do list. So that's already included within your ecosystem. So as you can see, this is a channel here, training by team member, and that has a planner for training. But you can have a planner for multiple things, not just for training. So, you know, the opportunities with that is endless. So like I said, you know, with Planner, the cool thing is that now when you create that channel, you can create a planner just for that channel. And I'll show you in a second how you can kind of have different channels for different things. But now you have a planner that belongs inside of that channel, which is the key, the organization piece of it, and everything is going to connect. The other one is Microsoft To Do. How many of you are aware that Microsoft To Do exists? If you can put yes or no in the chat, if you know that. All right, so Matthew, you use it, good. So Microsoft To Do is something that we're underutilizing. It comes automatically with your Microsoft ecosystem. You can basically manage your to-dos. It's available in both the desktop version and your phone version. You know, you can set up tasks, you can set up multiple lists. It's going to sync with your Outlook. So there's, you know, for example, have you guys ever seen that on Outlook, there is a flag email option? You guys are aware of that? So when you flag the email, that flag also shows up in your Microsoft To Do. So that's another way that you can look at it. And let me show you how the To Do looks like, for example. Here's how the app looks in my computer. So for example, here's all my flag emails. I can create lists. So for example, I have a list with my executive assistant that I can assign tasks to her. I can add multiple, you know, tasks for myself. I can have multiple people in that task list and things like that. So Microsoft To Do is one of the things that I highly recommend that if you don't have it in your laptop, you know, go ahead and download it. Download it on your phone and, you know, manage your to-dos that way because, like I said, when you're in the Microsoft ecosystem, that's the one advantage you have. When you get to-dos like outside of the Microsoft ecosystem, you can now have things talk to each other. But when you manage everything in the same ecosystem, it's a lot easier to have it talk to each other. So when you assign a task through Planner, so let's say we have a plan for training somebody, and I want someone specifically in my team to train that person, I can assign that task to that person, and now that task shows up in that to-do list. for that person. So it's kind of cool that they get a notification. Now it's in their task list and things like that. Like I said, you can flag an email as well. So how many of you keep unread emails in your email because that's your to-do list essentially? Type yes if that's how you do it, right? So now what I recommend that you do is that you flag that email or you create that email as a task, and you can now clear your inbox. And then you decide later when you want to answer that email and your inbox is clear, right? So that's what I highly recommend, is that you start kind of moving emails that you're not going to respond to it on the spot to a task list. And then you basically work those emails. You can set up a time and a date to be able to work those emails, but you're not working your to-do list out of your email. You're working it out through your task list in Microsoft To Do. So like we talked about, this is what chaos looks like for most of us. We're saving files in random folders. We're having conversations that are buried in chats. The folders that we have in our SharePoint don't match the task names that we have in our management system. For example, training files are, stored differently. So this is what's happening in most agencies today. So here's kind of how the integration flow works, so you have a better idea. And now I think when I share mine is going to make a lot more sense because it's a lot harder to grasp that information. So let's go ahead and look at my setup a little bit so you guys understand what I'm talking about. All right, so this is my team channel. You have here, this is what a team looks like. So for example, Foresight Insurance, that is a team. So when I need to go create a team, oh, I'm sorry. You mind muting that person, Mitch?
It's wild. Yeah, I got him. I got her.
So I can go here and I can basically, let me see, I think it's here. Where do I create a new team, Mitch?
Excuse me. Go to you're in favorites. You see where it says teams and channels?
Yeah, right here.
Go to the 3 dots. Oop. Add channel. You're trying to add a new team?
Maybe manage team.
No, if you're going to try to create a new team, on top of teams, right there it says teams. To the up top left. Up.
Yep.
Right there on the top. It says teams.
Okay. Your teams and channels.
That's weird.
Yeah, you can create a team right here. Here we go.
Oh, there it is.
You can create the team. Yeah, so you can give your team a name. You can give it a description. Remember, we talked about if you could decide if you wanted private, organization, a standard channel. So for example, this is what this is. This Foresight Insurance is a team channel that I have. Under this team, I have multiple channels. So you see, I have general announcements. I have sales and marketing service. So now I've decided to organize mine a little bit different. Essentially, what I decided to do is that the Foresight Insurance channel, everyone in my company has access to all the channels that I have in Foresight Insurance, except the only time that someone doesn't have access to a channel is if you see this little lock right here where it says leadership. So even though I can give everyone access to my channel, to all the channels inside that team, I can decide if I want a specific channel to be only private to certain people. Now, you're asking, well, Michael, why do you have it this way? Well, because it's all about visibility, right? For the most part, for most of us, a lot of the conversations and research that we have in our agency, we need to give everyone access to those things, okay? So what we did is basically there's multiple ways to use channels. We use channels for announcements. We use channels for the areas of business. We use channels for projects. So how many of you have projects like, let's say you have a bunch of monoline home that you want to cross-sell to auto, right? So I can create a monoline home cross-sell channel, and now I can add files that has all the lists of all my monoline cross-sell. I can create a loop component. You know, I can create a calendar. When are we going to call block for those people? I can create tasks. I can create all those things. Let's say someone has a question about the monoline cross-sell list project that we have. That question needs to be asked in this channel. Why? Because now we keep the conversation around that specific topic that has to do with the, but what happens? What do? People send a chat. Hey, Gina, I remember you were working on this to-do list. What do you think if we do blah, blah, blah? So everything that happens on chat, nobody can see. But if I ask you here in the channel, like, hey, can you look into this? Anyone that's working on that project can see that conversation instead of like having to repeat yourself. You can also have meetings. So you can schedule meetings inside of that channel. That way the meetings recordings are, again, they're, you know, basically here in this channel. So if you can notice what glues everything together is really the Teams. Teams becomes your hub for everything else, and it has access to everything. So if we look at sales and marketing, for example, I have my SharePoint files for sales and marketing inside of the team channel. So I'll be able to go into my knowledge base and I can access all of my files for sales and marketing in my operation. Even though they're stored in my SharePoint, I can access them through my teams. You see why everything connects together? Because that's why this is important, why to start from the top, creating the team and then putting the channels under that team. So all that information. So even though, for example, I show you guys my SharePoint, this is my SharePoint. Every time that I create a channel, it creates a folder in my SharePoint. So for example, we were looking at sales and marketing. This is the folder that I was looking at. No, the white, not a dumb question at all. It's basically an emoji. So if you put it in like in ChatGPT or anywhere else, just copy and paste the emoji into the channel, and that's how it looks like that. So, you know, does it make sense now why it's important to start from creating a team in Teams and then creating channels? So we'll keep this party going. So here's kind of like, I wanted to share a little bit of how we basically structure our team, our knowledge base. So essentially what I did is basically I decided that I wanted to organize my agency by 5 areas of operation. Okay. The 5 areas of operation for me is sales and marketing, service, carrier, agency operations, and training and development. Okay. So having that done, you can see here my 5 areas of operation: sales and marketing, service, carrier, agency operations, and training and development. Now you can have 10 if you want, right? I wanted to kind of like really narrow it down. So any questions with those 5 areas and what that means? And then I decided that once we go to once we decide on the area, then we have to break it down by personal versus commercial. And for example, if you have health, you can add health to it. So for example, if we go to my service channel, if I click on service, you'll see that I have personal or commercial here.
Obviamente, that's really exciting for everybody. So son buenas noticias.
All right, I just muted everybody. Sorry about that.
Exciting time.
So if you see here, we have service, personal, and then we have all the different things that we do. And guess what? In my management system, when I put that I have an account review task, guess what the name is in my management system for account review? It's exactly that. It's account review. Let's say that you want to change a car. That's a vehicle change. So now the folders in my intranet match the task that I'm doing inside of my management system. So that's how you keep the organization the same across all systems, across your SharePoint, across your management system, and things like that. Any questions with that? So this is kind of how we structure. So basically areas of operations, commercial versus personal, the task category, then we go down to the carrier specific. All right. So for example, if we go to a vehicle change, when we do a vehicle change, we're going to have different carriers that do those vehicle change. You know, Erie, Safeco, Progressive, to name a few. And that's how we create kind of layers, you know, after the type of task. And then we have the line of business after that, right? It's not going to be applicable for everybody. But for certain changes, you know, applies to basically an auto, a home. And then we even drill deeper. If you guys are in HawkSub, you know, HawkSub lets you add tags to a task. So we'll put, you know, if it's a vehicle change or vehicle addition, vehicle removal, and things like that. So you want to use that same language across all systems so that when you talk about things, when you talk about SOPs, everything kind of matches. Any questions with that? Great.
Mike Sharp wants to know how much you're going to charge him to build his out, I think is what he just asked.
I'm still trying to build mine out, Mike, but we'll talk offline for sure. All right. So here's kind of how things look. Sales and marketing, service, agency operations, carrier. So we talked about organizing the agency by the channels for each area of the operation. Then another idea, like we talked about, is also adding channels by projects. So how many of you, if you can put in the chat right now, what is one project right now that you're doing in your agency that has nothing to do with your like service stuff? You know, like let's say you have a project for you're building out something, a tech or something like that, a new website. There you go. Anybody else? Yep. Updating SOPs. So for example, that person that said updating SOPs, here's one for me. I'm working on organizing my SOPs, building my learning management system. So I have a channel for that. So for example, like if you're building a new website, you can go in here and you can add a channel. You know, you can put new website. You can describe that this is the thing you're gonna do. Now, I did want to point out something. Each channel has the option to either have the threads or a post. Does anybody know the difference between a thread and a post? If you want to put it in the chat. All right, so a post basically works like a Facebook post in your timeline. A thread looks more like this. This is a thread, essentially. So I like to set mine up as threads so that people can go and comment on these. Let me see. So, you know, we can basically, I can put a post here and then I can comment on this post by replying here, boom. And then I can keep the conversation, you know. So anything that is related to this project, then you want to have that conversation here instead of a chat. So that way everybody sees the notes. There's very little things that maybe something more private that you want to keep in the chat, but everything else that revolves around this project, all the conversations, all the meetings, all the files, you want to keep inside that channel so that it's accessible to everyone. Does that make sense?
Michael, so are you using, let's just say, like for me, I like threads for channels, but I feel like if it's a message out to the full entire team and I need something like it's news announcement, an update of some software, hey, payroll, HR, something like that, you're going to use more of that other style, correct?
Yeah, spot on. So basically my general announcements channel, which I don't want to post because I don't know if I have anything confidential there, but that one is set up as post. So when I post it, it looks very similar like a post in Facebook. Everything else I leave as a thread, which is a brand new feature that Microsoft has. It just came out with it like maybe a month or two ago. And it feels more of a conversation. So it's a little bit less threatening when you have it in the threads. So the collaboration is a little bit better. All right. So we talked about you want to use these channels for projects because then now you can keep all the conversations around that project inside of one channel, right? So let's kind of go over it. You know, you can create a project planner for that specific project inside that channel. So, you know, anything like that, any files that you save is going to be inside that channel. You know, any meetings that you want to have it inside that channel, so you can go back to that channel and rewatch any videos that you may have. Does that make sense? Why everything kind of ties together on that channel? So inside every channel, you're going to have a post tab, you're going to have a files tab, you're going to have a loop. Remember a loop component that we talked about. And loop, think of it like a notepad that has a bunch of different features, you know, inside of that, like more interactive notepad. And then you also have a planner inside that channel. You want to talk, you say you want to go back to the ecosystem? Was it this one right here? I think it was this one. Okay. I think you're talking about a different one. So Cruz, do you have OneNote for anything? No, we're not using OneNote anymore. We switched to basically Loop, because Loop has a lot more features than OneNote. You know, I can add tasks to Loop. I can see when people are looking at my Loop component. I can attach it to an email, to a chat, to a calendar invite. So Loop has a lot more features than OneNote. That's a great
So just
question.
to make like for example, I see the end of life coming for OneNote. I believe Microsoft in like earlier this year, it's like March or October, September earlier, actually this month, that they are like no longer doing any support help with the platform. So if you have an issue with technical support or whatever, I think we can look that out. And that's Microsoft for Windows 10 OneNote. So just to give you a heads up, the features on that they're probably not going to invest any more features into that system. So I would start maybe slimming yourself over to Loop. You are correct, though, Ciara. It's been very, very basic.
So again, like I show you guys, what I try to do is like, you first need to have your own internal organization before you go and start creating teams and channels and Loop, you know, and all that stuff. So you want to first map out how do you want to organize your agency, and then you can go and kind of duplicate that into your team structure. But essentially, Teams for me has become kind of the glue that ties everything together, the hub to access all the other Microsoft ecosystems, and then keeps it organized, right? Because it's really hard to manage projects, to manage this, to manage that, when everything is kind of disorganized. There's no way to organize it. But now I'm giving you the blueprint on how to keep it all together. You know, so anything that falls within sales and marketing, you know, we put it in the sales and marketing, in the channel and the folder. Any online home projects, the same thing. So yeah, my pleasure, Mike. Here's kind of how we use, like how you can use Loop, like we talked about. You can create SOPs, you can create a project plan, you can put meeting notes, you can use it as brainstorm. You know, Loop is a very powerful thing. So here's kind of the SOP project that we have right now. We created a channel for it called the SOP project. We created a planner to know what SOPs we're working on at the time, kind of like which ones are, you know, in the queue and which ones are being worked on. I can assign, let's say I have somebody that I want to work a specific SOP, and let's say it's my bucket of like, you know, in progress. I can move it to the in progress bucket. I can assign it to Mitch, and now it shows up in Mitch to do, but I can see it live. I was able to do all of that within the channel of the SOP development. And any SOPs that we build, we can kind of upload it to that channel. And now everything is tied inside that channel. Like it organizes everything for you, and it connects it, and it opens the door to the other systems. So yes, so we use Microsoft Tasks. So Mike Salisbury has a really good question. When do I use my management system task? Anything client and anything client related, we go to the management system. Anything that's not, you know, basically client related, we go to the Microsoft to do. So like responsibilities that I have as an agency owner, I'm even telling my staff, like, if you have an important, follow-up, the management system is your Bible, is where you go in your source of truth. But if you want an additional reminder, go to your to-do list and add the reminder there. Don't keep the emails open in your email inbox. It's not really meant for that. Transfer that email to your Microsoft To-Do, where you can set up due dates, you can set up alerts, you can add stuff to it, and you clear your inbox. So here's kind of thinking, how do you use channels versus chats? You want to use channels when the team needs that information to reference later. How many of us are only using chat right now to converse with our team and how many of you are using channels? Just curious. So I bet you that most of us are using chat because that's what we were doing too. The problem with chat is that it really locks the conversation. When you open up the conversation to Teams, now everybody in the team can access that conversation. Like, so let's say that we're teaching somebody something. Now we just taught the entire agency how to do it versus just on a one-on-one basis. The chat, it should only be on a one-on-one basis, very informal. The channels, it should be for communication that everybody should have access to. So, for example, for us, we use the chat a lot for like, asking a quick question or something like that. But anything else that you have a question on how to do a process or something like that, you're going to put it in a channel, because that way, when I answer your question, now I just train my whole agency and not just you.
Like, you had a question, there was a question about LMS. I think it was James. Have you moved your LMS into the Microsoft ecosystem, or still doing that independently?
Good question, James. We have it separately, but I am considering moving it to the Microsoft ecosystem because of all these benefits. But I just haven't had the chance to move it. But that's definitely on my radar. I want to test their LMS to see how good it is. That's another thing. Some of these apps, when they start them brand new, they're not as good, but they get better with time. So you just have to go back and kind of test it to see if it has improved.
Yep. I guess the thing for me, James, to give my insight, the thing stopping me from bringing that into the LMS internally, is actually, it's kind of simple, because our LMS is actually in that SharePoint. The external platform we use, we just embed that information that's in our SharePoint, those LMS courses, into another platform. So it's pretty much reading all the documentation from our SharePoint that anyone could go find anyways in our agency. So, I mean, in a nutshell, yes, we are. The foundation is there to where if we did move it over, we just have to plug the components in the right places. But it's lacking better quizzes, better automation with Power Automate and some of that stuff. So once that gets cleaned up and not as clunky, I think everybody will love the LMS internally better.
Yeah, good point, Mitch. We save first all of our written SOPs in a Word document inside of our, basically SharePoint. Then we go and upload that training to an LMS. So you still want to have your separate place where you're going to, put that actual written SOP and things like that. So that's a really good point, regardless of if you use an external LMS or not. But what I just shown you is basically that I can, if I have a specific question that I need to answer on an SOP, I can find it really fast because I already know my organization system. You know what I mean? I know where everything is based on the type of part of the operation. We all use the same terminology. We use, for example, a vehicle change is a vehicle change in Hawksoft. It's a vehicle change in my SharePoint. It's a vehicle change in my learning management system. So you want to use the same terminology across all systems. This way, like, new hires get consistent training. Like, for example, we have a 4-day work week. So we've had to like really double down on documenting all of our processes and having a consistent system so that when someone is off, someone else can pick up what the other person left off. So we have to really be disciplined with doing the same thing. I don't want to cover the rest. What I want to show you is my SharePoint, because another challenge that people have is that you have all these folders and it's hard to find information. So what we did in ours is that we added a chatbot to our SharePoint. So that way you can access all the information that you have without having to find the folder. So basically, all of you can do this. I think you can also do it with Microsoft Copilot, for example. So now that you have everything documented inside your SharePoint, you can build a chatbot for your internal knowledge base. You can also use other tools like this. So for example, I can say, what do I need to do a vehicle change? And why don't you guys type a question that you want to see if I have it in my if you have a question, maybe put it in the chat and maybe I can ask to see what comes up. But essentially here you have the instructions on how a vehicle change works in my agency, what information that I need, and I can see exactly where it's referencing that data. So I can go back to that actual documents. So for example, I can see, all right, let's see what this document is about. This document is a document inside of my, basically, inside of my learning management system, the most common calls handling, for example. As you can see, here's my folders, that I've pinged here. I have all the vendors, technology vendors, all the carriers. I also have a company directory. I have you can book meetings with different people. I have a mortgagee list. I have a carrier list. So all this inside of my SharePoint that you guys can do on your own, because we all have employees. And when you onboard new employees, how do they know the website of the carriers, the code and stuff like that? So but that SharePoint was literally built with a team that I created. And that gave me access to basically add all my documents and all these tools inside of the SharePoint. There are other tools you guys can look into. Microsoft Forms is one. So like if you want to get feedback for something in your team, Power Automate, Power BI, those are more advanced stuff that you can hire people to do for you. But again, if you keep everything in the same ecosystem, now you can unlock all these different tools inside of the Microsoft without having to do Zapier and all this kind of stuff. So here's kind of some of the advanced integrations that Microsoft even has a social media that you can have internally. So you can have your own internal social media with Viva Engage, where people can post stuff and stuff like that. So that's kind of cool. When you save videos, you can use Stream as your video hosting. So you can upload a video to your SharePoint, and Stream even transcribes it. You can play it. Microsoft Bookings, is not as advanced as Calendly, but it does the job. So if you want to create a basic, booking page that actually syncs with your calendar automatically, Microsoft
It's getting
Bookings.
better. I did some incredible stuff yesterday, Michael. Believe it or not, couldn't have done this a year ago. But for Indie Tech, we are trying to get all of our vendors to book which time and what room they're going to do their demo in. We figured it out to be able for people to select certain amounts of allocation. So it's getting better. Stream, you're able to now screen share. You're able to click record and screen share. So eventually you might be able to replace Loom, right? So just think about consolidation at some point in time for those items that are costing you extra dollars too. So keep up to date with what's new.
Yeah, so a few things to so we wrap up early. Avoid creating too many teams, and once you have too many teams, you can archive them so it's not populating. Understand, save stuff in SharePoint. Do not save on your drive for like stuff that's the agency that you're gonna share. Have consistency with the naming, like I showed you about. Don't overcomplicate the permissions that happens to us at Virtual Intelligence. We created too many teams. It was very complex for teams to look at each other's files. So the simpler, the better. There's very little things that you have to kind of guard, like financials and stuff like that. But everything else that everybody should be having access to, just make it, accessible to everyone. So this is how we did it. We have one integrated ecosystem. Everything is exactly where it should be. So
Michael, real quick, Ciara has a really, really great question that I know you've got a good answer to. Does everyone have the authority to update these systems, or is someone responsible? There's solely one person responsible for updating the system specifically. I see that as a double part fold because there are SOPs in there, and responsible parties are in charge of updating SOPs only. But if you're not an owner of the team, you have no right to change or update anything of the structure. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we, for example, have authority on our SOPs. Only certain people have the authority to actually change them. So that's something that you can definitely do. If you want someone, for example, from the external to have access to stuff, then you have to basically add them, or create them an email inside your ecosystem for them to have access to all those things. I hope you all found this useful. A little bit of a self plug here. I have basically a weekly newsletter that I've been doing since March. If you go on my website, themichaelcruz.com, you'll get access to, you'll be able to join. I know it says waiting list, but it's really my newsletter. So feel free to go on my website and sign up for my newsletter. Every Wednesday, I basically share what I'm working on. All these different things you saw here. I share stuff like that all the time. And I hope you guys can learn more and more as I experiment with new things. I also want to encourage all of you to book a demo with Athena. You know, it's so weird that the QR code is not working. If you go to virtualintel.com, you're able to, basically check us out. This is, thanks to Virtual Intelligence for making this happen. But I want to open it up. We have 4 minutes left. Does anyone have any questions that I can answer that we maybe didn't cover?
Dwight, did we use someone to train your team on how to use Teams? Michael's probably the same as me. We did the old try to figure it out on our own method as individuals, and once we've kind of figured it out, we're still trying to figure things out. But it's about once you've created the thing, it's about creating training video around what you just did, so that you can easily train. Just created training modules and lessons on how to use Teams the right way, and that's what we train all of our staff on. It's just training modules that we've created as well.
Yeah, and someone asked Paul if we used chat or team for each insurance company. I kind of showed, we have a carrier, kind of tab on a channel essentially. I use that carrier channel for anything that doesn't fall within the other, kind of things that I have, like, for example, like sales or service. So I may save like maybe carrier updates, underwriting guidelines inside that carrier or something specific from the carrier. So I hope that makes sense.
Question, are you using any other AI products outside of Microsoft, maybe particularly with the bot, Michael? I know some of our VI clients have that bot that we can provide for them, but
yeah, if you guys are a VI client, we can get you access to this bot as kind of a beta. So definitely contact us, and we can, for a very low cost, because we haven't wanted to share with everybody because we didn't know the capacity of it. So, but yeah, we can definitely talk to you guys to test it out to see, with your agency inside Microsoft. If a document is in a channel, where is it actually stored? In the SharePoint, essentially. And yes, we'll be sending the recording via email, so be on the lookout for that. That's exactly where we'll be sharing. So definitely be on the lookout for the email with this recording. I'm sorry that it got a little technical. It's a little hard sometimes to kind of, as I'm walking through things, sometimes it's easier just to show you my setup. And I hope that was helpful for you to kind of tie it together. But yeah, do you guys have any more questions? All right. Well, hey, I hope you found it helpful. Thank you so much for coming and joining us. I hope you had some insight into Microsoft, and I hope everyone has a great day. Okay. Thank you very much.